Welcome. I'm Debbie Brown, and we are joining in the company of the committed in chapter 4 of The Disciple's Heart by James Harnish. Now, you say the company of the committed, that could apply to us in two different ways. Our scripture for today is Galatians 6:2, which says, "Carry one another's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ." Carry one another's burdens. Very powerful statement in this chapter by our author. Our journey is personal, not private. That's another one of those banners to put up on the mirror. Our journey is personal, but not private. If we live a life of piety that we never share our personal experiences, how do we sync up our hearts? How do we get those hearts in line with what God is calling us to do? I don't know about you, but I was brought up in the South, and what we always heard was, don't air your dirty laundry. Don't air your dirty laundry. Never show weakness. It's the Southern way. We didn't talk about anything that was wrong. You don't talk about unpleasant things. I used to hold myself, as I was taught by my family, above people that had those kinds of problems. Those problems. Because nothing like that ever happened in our family. And so we come into church and we're wearing a mask and we say, "How are you?" "Fine, fine, fine." How many times have you said, "Fine, fine, fine"? I tried this at graduation a couple of weeks ago. I went in and people asked me how I was doing and I told them. And one professor said, "You made me feel a lot better. I'm doing better than you are." So I brought joy to his life in another way. Okay, so if we try to keep all those secrets about how we're really doing, it's like holding an inner tube underwater, and eventually it makes your arms so tired. What happens too is then that thing flies up and hits you in the face. And so those problems, those burdens that we have that we're not willing to share with other people, they just sit in there. And there's no way for you to share yourself with God and with all of the company of the people who have committed themselves to Christ without sharing a piece of who you are. We come in and say, "Fine, fine, fine," but our heart's saying, "I'm lost, I'm sad, I'm losing hope." I have found that in the right place and the right time, sharing your burdens can be a beautiful thing. When you can look in a friend's face and see that love for you and that they are listening to what your burdens are, that is a beautiful thing, and some of the most beautiful times in my life where I saw that connection of another disciple's heart sharing burdens with me. Now, sometimes you share your heart and you get a from the other person. Like, "I don't want to hear that. You told me more than I wanted to know." But you know what I found over time is that it's worth it to take the chance. If somebody doesn't want to hear it, that is not an insult to me. It's worth it to me to share that and take the chance, because I want to see that beautiful love from another disciple's heart, sharing my whole self. You know what it is to me? Real people, real problems, real faith. And that's who I'm trying to surround myself with, to take on the work and the purpose that God has sent me here for. Not just to stay with them, because that's an end unto itself, but to go out with that kind of support into the world. Real people, real problems, real faith. Can we make that God's church? And what would that church be like? Our technology today can lead us to a lonely, lonely place. Our author calls it a selfie culture, that you're only interested in what you can see from your arm's length. Some people get a stick and get a little bit bigger picture. I heard a sermon a couple of months ago that said we live in an I culture, an iPad, an iPod, an iMac, an iPhone, and we spell we with two I's. Do y'all know what I'm talking about? Okay. So in my job, I come into contact with these 18-year-olds every 4 months. I see them adrift, anxious, self-medicating, because they are looking for something that's going to make them beautiful and successful and have plenty of money and to be better than everybody else. They say the number one reason for depression in young people today is social media, because they're always looking at what other people are doing and comparing themselves to that. I know my niece has a friend that's perfect on social media, this beautiful family. And I say, you know, I really want that life. They look so beautiful and all the quotes on there are so perfect. And she said, Aunt Debbie, their marriage is falling apart. They don't love each other anymore. All they have is that fantasy that's online. God gives us answers in Corinthians and Ephesians about spiritual gifts. And He says He's given each one of us a different one that we can put together for the common good. To access God's holy power, we need a changed heart and an invitation to invite others into that changed heart. You try to do it by yourself and you're weak. And it doesn't radiate. If it's just you with just your resources, it doesn't go very far. It's here. But if we all come together and put all our resources together, which is our hearts that are transformed for God, and then we take those gifts and our personality and our passions and put those all together, each one of you sitting there is unique. And you could go off by yourself and your strengths are just what they are and your weaknesses are just what they are. But you come into a group and put it all together, now it's something bigger. It's something more. And you ask God to be a part of it, there's no telling what could happen and what will happen in God's church. Do we see the church as an exclusive club for those living the highest standards? Don't come in that door if you don't fit what I think a Christian should be. Or are we more like Jesus? Jesus was a dragnet. He was sweeping people up and bringing them along, finding people where they are and calling them to follow Him. In Acts 10, there's a story about Peter, and he's talking to a Gentile, Cornelius. And Cornelius believes that Peter should not be talking to him. He himself, he said, I'm not good enough to talk to you because you're with Jesus. And Peter says God has shown him to never call another person impure or unclean. He is Lord of all. Is that the way we look at people? Do we see the church as a club that only certain people are allowed? Peter Story wrote about the tendency for humans to divide and exclude. When was the first time you didn't get invited? 2nd grade, birthday party, Linda. I was the only one in the class she didn't invite. How old am I? 63. 2nd grade, I can remember that like it was yesterday. When Jesus came into people's lives, He would come into your heart and say, I love to be here. Can I bring my friends? That was a wow statement for me. Jesus says, let me into your heart and let me bring my friends. And everybody that I love is welcome there. Some of the research about social media says that we really get a bead on what our number is in middle school. I think it comes before that now. I think it used to be middle school. How do you know your number? Your rating. It's who invites you to what? Who will sit with you at lunch? That's a big thing, right? Is what table you get to sit at lunch, if any of you are involved with children in school. Who you get invited to go places with. We are in, you are out. I saw a science fiction TV story about how social media now allows us to rate everything. You know, the car services rate you as a passenger, and they share it with each other. Like if you're messy or you smell bad or you're always late or whatever, so they're rating you. Everything you do, they ask you, will you rate this? And in this science fiction show, everybody had a rating, and every time you walked up to somebody, you could see what their rating was before you even met them. And so we're rating each other. We're judging each other. We're trying to see who we want to be associated with and who we don't. Look at Jesus' examples about who he was with. Everybody that the church at the time said, no, we don't want them to come in here because they're not up to our standards. Jesus was a dragnet. He picked everybody up and brought them along. Can we allow ourselves to see the beauty in others and discard our human attempts that don't support those actions? Real people, real problems, real faith.